Good morning. I'm Stephen Leake. I'm an elder at First Presbyterian Church in Mesquite, Texas, and I'm also one of the teachers of the Discipleship Sunday School class there. Today we're continuing with our study of the Gospel of John, and we're in chapter 15, where Jesus is giving advice to his disciples before the Passion begins. I'd like to remind you that we're using the Daily Bible Study Series by Professor William Barclay as our curriculum, and that we're using the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible for our scripture readings. Now, this one piece of scripture that we have today is a difficult read, so bear with me as I go through it with you. If the world hates you, be aware that it hated me before it hated you. If you belong to the world would love you as its own. Because you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. Remember the word that I said to you, servants are not greater than their master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you. If they kept my word, they will keep yours also. But if they do all these things to you on account of my name, because they do not know him who sent me. John always sees things in terms of black and white. To him, there are two great entities, the church and the world. And there's no contact or fellowship between them. As he saw it, people are either of the world or of Christ, and there's no in between. Further, we must remember that by this time, the church was living under constant threat of persecution. Christians were persecuted just because of the name of Christ. Christianity was illegal, and the punishment for being Christian could be death. John was speaking of a situation which existed in the most clear-cut and agonizing way. One thing is certain, Christians who were persecuted could not say that they had not been warned. On this matter, Jesus had been quite explicit. He had told his people beforehand exactly what they might expect. When John wrote, this hatred had long since begun. The Roman historian Tacitus spoke of the people hated for their crimes, whom the mob call Christians. The Roman government hated Christians because it regarded them as disloyal citizens. The position of the government was quite simple and understandable. The empire was vast. It stretched from the Euphrates to Britain and from Germany to North Africa. It included all kinds of people and all kinds of countries within it. Some unifying force had to be found to weld them into one, and it was found in Caesar worship. Now, Caesar worship was not imposed on the world. It actually rose from the people themselves. The spirit of Rome was symbolized in the emperor. He stood for Rome. He embodied Rome. The spirit of Rome found its home in him. It's a mistake to think that the subject people resented the Rome government. For the most part, they were profoundly grateful for it. Rome brought justice and freed them from kings. Rome brought peace and prosperity. The land was cleared of brigands and the sea was cleared of pirates. The Pax Romana, the Roman peace, stretched all over the world. It was in Asia Minor that people began to think of Caesar, the emperor, as the god who embodied Rome. And they did so in sheer gratitude for the blessings that Rome had brought them. At first, the emperors discouraged and deprecated this worship. But they saw that they could not stop it. Then the government saw that they could use it. Here was the unifying principle which was needed. So there came the day when once a year every inhabitant of the empire had to show loyalty to Caesar and receive a certificate for doing so. Now Rome was the essence of tolerance. After he had said, "Caesar is Lord," a man could go away and worship any god he liked, so long as the worship did not affect public decency and order. But that's precisely what the Christians would not do. They would call no man Lord except Jesus Christ. They refused to conform, and therefore the Roman government regarded them as dangerous and disloyal. The Roman government persecuted the Christians because they insisted they had no king except Christ. It was not only that the government persecuted the Christians, the masses hated them. And that was because people believed slanderous things about the Christians. And there's no doubt that the Jews were, at least to some extent, responsible for those slanders. It so happened that the Jews had the ear of the government officials, and 5 slanderous things were spread by them about the Christians. The Christians were said to be revolutionaries, and we've seen the reason for that. The fact that the Christians would not take the annual loyalty pledge branded them as dangerous and disloyal. Second, they were said to be cannibals. This charge came from the words of the sacrament. As the elements of the sacrament were referred to as the body and the blood of Christ, the charge stuck, and the masses looked upon the Christians with loathing. Third, they were said to practice the most flagrant immorality. The weekly meal of the Christians was called agape, the love feast, and Christians met each other with a kiss of peace. It was not difficult for the masses to entertain ideas of immoral behavior from that. Fourth, Christians were said to be fire raisers. They looked to the second coming of Christ and attached it to Old Testament pictures of the day of the Lord, which foretold the disintegration and destruction of the present world. And fifth, it was said that Christians tampered with family relationships, that Christianity divided families, split up homes, and broke up marriages. In a way, that was true, as one in a family might not be a Christian, and so that split the family. Such were the causes of hatred in the early days. But it's still true that the world will hate Christians. There's bound to be a rift between those who regard God as the only reality in life and those who regard God as totally irrelevant for life. The world suspects people who are different. Anyone who's different, wears different clothes, or who has different ideas is automatically suspect. The world dislikes people whose lives are a condemnation of it. It's dangerous to be good. It's dangerous to practice a higher standard than the standard of the world. The world always suspects the nonconformist. It likes a pattern, and it likes to label people. Anyone who does not conform will certainly meet with trouble. The basic demand on Christians is the demand that they should have the courage to be different. To be different is to be dangerous. None of us can be a Christian unless we are willing to accept that risk. For there must be a difference between the men and women of the world and the men and women of Christ. Thanks for joining me again today. God bless each and every one of you.